Okay, hi everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Beth Denneberg, I'm the Public Information Officer on this project. And I want to introduce the people who will be presenting this presentation. We will be hearing from Councilman Pat Young later after the presentation. We're going to open with Nick. You good to go? Nick Smith and Kawoti Wando from the structures section who are managing this project, and then they will pass it off to John Seifert and Paul Murata from JMT, who are the design consultants on the project.
Sorry about that, I got delayed on my way here.
That's all right.
So I'm Nick Smith, I'm the chief of the structural design section of Baltimore County. Kawoti, the project manager, is also here. And here to carry on the rest of the presentation is our consultant designers. I'll pass it off to them.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, my name is John Seifert. I'm a structural engineer with Johnson, Murmurin and Thompson, or JMT for short. And this is my associate, Paul Murata. So the purpose of this meeting is we're going to go over what is happening for this slope protection, for this failed slope between Frederick Road and Bryans Mills Way. The project scope for this we're going to go over. We're also going to go over what type of traffic pattern is going to be in place when we're done. And then we're going to talk about the cost of the project. And then, obviously, the reason why we're here is because we want to get your input. So the project location, I'm sure you're all very familiar with this location. But, you know, between Ellicott City and Catonsville, this project area is along, well, just north of 144 Frederick Road and Bryans Mills Way. To the north of the project is Benjamin Banneker Park. And the area you see in red here is the total project area, but the slope protection is going to be really in the bottom, like half of that red area. So one of the things we tried to consider when doing this was the existing traffic pattern for this area. The state provided us with traffic counts. As you can see, this little graphic here is their actual traffic count for the area. Approximately 2,200 vehicles pass through this area per day. And when they took this survey of the vehicles, this traffic count as they call it, the traffic count was done during the weekday. Now, weekday during peak hours, which are morning rush and evening rush hours, to get a more accurate or a conservative view of the number of vehicles. The posted speed is 25 miles an hour, and as you're going around the curve, the posted speed drops to 20. There's a weight restriction on the road. I don't know.
Somebody better tell us true it's that.
Yeah, right. It's 5 tons, which is really just like a UPS or like a FedEx truck, because it is quite narrow. And accident data. We did not receive a tremendous amount of accident data. I'm sure there's accidents that have occurred, but we did not receive any that would alter the engineering design. The existing condition. So right now, we all know this is a 2-lane road. However, that roadway does vary. The roadway is approximately 20 feet in one section, and then it narrows down to about 17 feet. Now, with 2 lanes, that's like 9.5-foot lanes, or 8.5-foot lanes, which is extremely narrow. And so we're trying to get away from that as well. The temporary barrier was put in, and we're going to get to that after a storm, and I believe it was 2018. Yes. And that further constricted the roadway. but the temporary barrier was there really just to hold back part of the slope. And there are drainage inlets. There's one just north of the site, right by Bryans Mills Way. And then the other one is down right at the end of Old Frederick Road, down by Frederick Road. And that one we're going to wind up improving. But the one at the top should be fine. Benjamin Banneker Park, back in 2018 when they had the slope failure, that red trail that lined the top was closed and relocated. So this project, when we do the slope stabilization, it will kind of go up into that area, but it will not impact Benjamin Banneker Park. Maybe the construction easement might be, but our slope stabilization will be within all of the county's right of way and not in the park right of way. And then we did do a bunch of soil borings in the area to determine how hard the rock is, what type of material we're dealing with. And it's a lot of decomposed rock, a lot of hard rock. We've done projects in this area, and the rock is just extremely hard and very dense. So we try and not have to drill into rock or try not to do anything with the rock because it just gets extremely expensive. So here's the failure event I was talking about. This is a picture taken actually off of Baltimore County's website. And the severe rain event, I believe there were two. There was the one in 2016 and one in 2018. We actually worked on the project over in Hartford and Howard County along New Cut Road, the walls that were done there. So we know the damage that occurs from these two storms. So those two storms, yeah, they flooded Ellicott City, and unfortunately there's some people who passed away from it. A tremendous amount of rain fell during those two storms, but we're going to focus on 18 because that's what caused this slope failure. And 8 inches in 2 hours, which is really unprecedented. The erosion that came from that storm was bringing well-rooted trees down, a bunch of silt, branches, and everything. And you can actually see in the picture here, use my laser pointer. So, I'm not going to worry about that. So, as you can see here, we have a lot of silt that's occurred, some down branches. You see there's a backhoe back there just trying to clear the debris. I don't know how long this road was closed, but enough to cause a disruption to all of you here. And this event was the reason why, as I stated before, that the temporary barrier was put in place and the relocation of the red trail. So we came out in, what was it, March? Yep. Yeah. We came out in March and walked around the site and snapped a couple photos of, as evidence of the deterioration of this slope and the hillside that began to, or is evident that further problems are on the way should we not fix this slope. There are trees that are down, uprooted. The slope is extremely steep. There is a lot of rock there that does hold some of it in place, but not all of it. All right, and so right now, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Paul Murata, who's going to go into some of the analysis and the study that we had done. Paul.
So as the design consultants, as J&T, in phase 1 of the design, we conducted an alternative analysis study. With that study included a traffic impact detour study, a tree identification delineation memo, and we'll talk more about that in the next slides, water resources design memo, and then getting into the alternatives that were analyzed, we had 3 retaining wall options and 2 barrier options that we studied. We also studied 3 roadway options, which included a 2-lane, 1 lane with bike lanes, and a 1 lane with a reduced shoulder. Ultimately, the barrier wall with 1 lane and reduced shoulder was determined to be the only viable option with the available budget of $1.14 million. And as you can see right here, this is a section view of what that looks like. The next phase of design will be final design and then move into construction. So as you can see here, it's an overview of the project area, the limits of work. The main focus, obviously, is the slope stabilization, which will be in this area here. As part of stabilizing that failed slope, we will be removing trees and replacing it with new landscaping. We would put in a new permanent, more stable barrier in along the base of the stabilized slope and repave the roadway and restripe it adjacent to the proposed barrier. You can also see, this gives you a little nice visualization of the relocated red trail up there, and the limits of construction are a little bit over the Baltimore County right-of-way line, as you can see right here. And along with the other proposed improvements, there is an inlet here, we're calling the north inlet, and the south inlet here. The south inlet will have some modification for drainage intake.
Can I say something about the drainage? The drainage at the bottom you're talking about,
Yeah.
improving. The one at the top, that ices over in the winter time.
Okay.
Is there nothing you'll be able to do about that?
So we conducted a drainage analysis based on county criteria, and what we found with the results is that it's adequate to take all of the volume intake. And we also looked in some other, stormwater management and, erosion and sediment control as well.
Is that drain still
In terms
gonna
of
dump in?
icing, I guess you just need to get it salted would be the most good
Is that
way.
drain still gonna dump into the stream that's adjacent to that?
So we have a limited scope in terms of drainage on this project. Any other drainage improvements would be, I would say, out of the scope of this project.
And that's kind of added to what, my house got extremely flooded in
Yeah.
2018. And that's kind of what added to it, was that drain at that point was only in 2 years.
Yeah.
And it added to the flow of that stream, which actually runs directly underneath my house. And that's, kind of the corporate problem,
Yes. Well, what I will say is, with the new road, there'll be a widened shoulder, and there will be less debris, in theory, along the route. So that's how we handle that. Okay, so back onto the proposed. So this.
But, sir, we'll take note of that and
Yeah.
we'll address them.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, we will be open to questions.
Maintenance issue, whether they need to clean out that part of the system, so we'll look into that.
Thanks. Yeah, so we have some nice imagery here of the, existing condition. This is on Old Frederick Road, looking towards Frederick Road, with the temporary barrier in place. And as you can see, it's hard to see, but there is some existing rock outcroppings, along here. And then to the right is the proposed rendering, excuse me, with the barrier we can talk a little bit more about later, and a nice landscape slope, and possibly some more rock outcroppings there. And we're actually we want input from you guys on what type of barrier and what type of landscaping we get, and we can talk more about that later. So as part of the alternative study, we also developed plans, and this is just a plan view of the site. The stabilized slope is here in green, so that'll be re-sloped earth, and we'll show you a better view of that later. But as you can see, it's hard to see, but it's very steep over on this end. It gets more shallower here, so that's why this green area is more wide here, because we have to go further back to make a nice stable slope. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. So we also have the proposed barrier wall here in pink, and the repaved road here in gray. The drainage inlets over here and over there, as I mentioned previously. And right up here is where the Banneker Park right of way is there. Okay. So here is where I can show you a little bit more about where the cross section the stabilized slope will be. As you can see here, this is just one representative of the cross-section along the roadway. This is pretty steep here, and this is causing the issue and the failure. It's unstable, as you've heard us say multiple times. But what we like to do is 2 to 1 is the maximum stable slope we like to do when you, so that's 2 in the horizontal direction, 1 in the vertical direction, to get a slope that will be self-sustaining. And there's the barrier there. And then we have a close-up view of here with a nice drainage block behind the barrier. And the drainage will go through there and into the locations that needs to be done. And we will be utilizing, a tried and true standard Maryland barrier for the barrier wall. Okay. So here's where we get a little bit into what types of barrier wall finishes we could use on the front. On the left here, you have a nice, smooth, more traditional concrete finish. And on the right, this is what we call a stamped four-liner finish. It is stained. We have it stained to try to look like to match the surrounding rock in the area, the rock outcroppings, as you can see all around Ellicott City and in the surrounding area. And here is just a sample, unstained close-up of the finish that is proposed at this stage. Okay. And I told you we talk a little bit more about the trees. So we conducted a forest delineation and identification. We identified what we call a forest stand 1, and that just means a contiguous form of trees that like trees in the area. And we only focus on what's in the Baltimore County right-of-way along here. And what we found was the existing trees are in fair to poor condition with signs of disease, a lot of vines and stuff. There's abundance of invasive species, like tree of heaven and other sorts of that nature. There was no trees larger than 30 inches, what we call specimen trees. And along with this forest stand and that we're disturbing the trees here, we will need an environmental impact review permit. Along with the forest stand and what we looked at there, there's what are called roadside trees within roadside right-of-way. And those are 2-inch diameter and greater. And those are these little dots mapped out all along here. Those are the roadside trees. And they're all within the right-of-way, which is along this line right there. And we will need another permit for that because of the disturbance. So we're estimating at this point that it'll be around 70 trees that will need to be removed. But we will be replacing them with new landscaping along that slope. And we'll get some input, hopefully, from you guys on what that may be. But typically, you go more native trees and plants along the river. So on to, again, the traffic, like I said, we get into the proposed traffic pattern. 2 lanes, so this is the corridor here, Old Frederick Road, Oella Avenue, and Frederick Road. From Bryans Mills Way to Oella Avenue, along this stretch, 2 lanes will be maintained to access Bryans Mills Way and the driveways along Old Frederick Road. And going between, really the area of focus, going between Frederick Road and Bryans Mills Way, this portion here will be restricted down to 1 lane. And as a part of the traffic analysis, we conducted a northeast and southwest, these 2 directions, directional traffic analysis to see what the results would be. And we found that it's similar traffic operations either way. For safety's sake, we really looked into what this is Frederick Road, MD 144, we're looking north-south here. We found there's 2 lanes here, or we know there's 2 lanes here, which are not present up at the Oella Avenue intersection. So for a left-hand turn here, it's much safer to have what we call a bypass lane on this side, to do a left-hand turn into here. So that's why we are recommending going northeastbound traffic in that direction. For safety, really. Okay, and on to the next. So during construction, what the maintenance of traffic will be, it'll be a detour. It's just too narrow in there to really have safe traffic on there during construction. So the detour route will be along Old Frederick Road, Oella Avenue, and Frederick Road. And the analysis shows that the traffic, the detour will be about 2 to 3 minutes travel time. And the analysis also shows that acceptable traffic operations will be maintained along the detour route according to state criteria. And I believe that about covers that portion of the presentation. And I will hand it back over to Nick to go a little bit more into the schedule and costs and other things like that. There you go.
Thank you, Paul. So the current project status and our cost estimate. So with this study completed, we're at about 30% design. We commonly refer to that as TS&L type, size, and location. So that's about the level of detail we're at this point. There's still plenty more detailing and things to figure out. But we're still working with the project funding we got in the FY24 capital budget. And we're looking at a construction cost estimate of $850,000, which we do have available from that funding. And the rest of the project schedule, so we have the alternative analysis complete. Moving forward from here, we're expecting final design complete in December of 2025. And then moving into spring of 2026 is when we expect to start construction, with construction finishing in the fall. So our next steps and input from all of you, anything that we get from you tonight through the questions or through any of the comment cards we have, or after you leave here, if you want to send us an email, we have a dedicated email for this project. Multiple people are keeping an eye on that, so we will get your feedback. And taking into account that feedback, we're going to move through our final design milestones, getting all of our permitting, getting concurrence with the park because we do have to access some of the park property, and getting through all the design approvals. And a contact us page. Like I said earlier, Cody Wandham is the project manager. We have the phone number there. You can call in and talk to us. That email again. And we also have our current projects page, which has information about the previous presentations we've done, and this one will go up there as well once we get that all put together. If you wanted to snap the QR code real quick, that'll get you the email and the web page. You don't have to remember how to spell it.
And this presentation will be emailed out after the meeting if you signed in and we have your email.
When you say about the landscaping, does Baltimore have a landscaping manual that would require certain types of plantings to go in that slope? And if you're removing, 70 trees, would you not have to replace 70 trees at least?
So the question is, do we have a landscaping manual at the county that requires certain landscaping, and are there requirements to replace a certain number of trees given the trees that we're removing? I don't know if Justin maybe can help me.
So Paul, you kind of touched on that, but do you want to go into details with what you guys are going to do with the landscape?
Sure. Well, at this stage of the design, we don't have landscape architects or any of the like on board, but it will be addressed in further stages of the design in terms of having a place like for like.
Right, there are certain minimum requirements.
Yeah, our environmental protection office, as part of the permitting process, will give us the list of trees that are acceptable and permitted in Baltimore County in this area.
And then number and
Yep,
there's
they'll assess how many we
requirements,
take
minimums.
out, how many we put back, and we may not be able to put them all right here. They may have to have another area where we plant, and we pay into a fund to plant. Depending on the
so
slopes.
not
what we-
necessarily where you're taking them out of. really.
Well, with the slopes, we may not be able to plant every tree here.
Okay, but in what kind of area, like somewhere else in the county as a whole, or in?
Well, that's what we work with our environmental office. They try to keep it in the
Okay.
area where,
So, just-
yeah.
And generally, there are guidelines related specifically Yeah, but also what shouldn't go in, what
Exactly.
can't go in. And to your point, it generally is take out a tree, if the county takes out a tree, they will replace a tree. But also to your point, sometimes that isn't necessarily in the same place. But I can also get details related to health and department environment, when they do projects like this, not
Yes.
specifically this one, how they handle it.
And sometimes it's not one-to-one, they may require a 2-to-1,
Right.
they do that assessment.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
What does the signage look like? Do we have any idea what the signage will look like and any impact for those cars who get to a point and have to turn around in Bryans Mill? What that looks like? Does that impact that? Because that's already a tight, very tight in that when you make your entrances to Bryans Mill, and I'm hoping construction vehicles won't be used there, but what does that signage look like and how is that turnaround going to be impacted for those people who live in Bryans Mill?
So the question is about the signage that will be at Old Frederick and Bryans Mill.
Where does it start? Is it going to start up at the circle? Where are you going to start letting people know that it's going to become a one-way?
Sure. So the exact location of the signs is something that will have to get determined in design. We went over around the intersection of Bryans Mills Way and Old Frederick is where we're going to move to a one-way. But to make sure that everyone who has driveways along Old Frederick can access, to make sure that there is an ability to turn around and people are well notified that it's going to become one-way. We have to do some more, a little closer look, get some traffic engineers to look at it and give us their recommendations on that.
So are you impacting that, thinking that that turnaround point is going to be the entrance of Bryans Mill Way?
Yes, that will absolutely be taken into
Is there a consideration of that being widened?
We will have to look at what particular is out there and what we're able to achieve without causing other problems.
So one of the things our transportation planning office will have to work with us on is turn radiuses, so any emergency vehicles, buses, and that trash trucks can get down there, turn around, and get out. So that's part of what their review of our plans will entail.
So that will impact the elementary school bus there? Has that been, does that, you talk with the county after the plan has been made, or is that just up to the county to figure out, Baltimore County Public Schools to figure out an alternate route?
Oh, no, it'll be up to us to coordinate with the schools.
The schools are somewhat separate from us, but we do still coordinate with them for things like that.
Which leads to my next question, because one of the bus routes goes down Old Frederick Road to Frederick and then continues down the 9-mile circle. So my question is, how many more feet would be required to extend the barrier over so you could retain 2 lanes, 1, and then 2, how much additional cost would be involved in that if you come up with those numbers?
We did.
Yeah, do you want to hit the costs of the other ones?
Yeah, the cost of 2 lanes would be about, the question is, how many feet would the barrier need to be moved from what we're proposing now to make it 2 lanes, and what would be the additional cost? It would be about 1.5 times plus more to do 2 lanes, and you'd be moving the barrier 10 feet. The barrier location right now is actually like on the road,
Yes,
and for safety purposes, and really, if you were driven on, I know you guys have driven on it, it's really tight, especially around that pinch point around the curve. So, yeah, 10 feet to your answer, just about.
All right, well, in the meantime then, just for the sake of argument, if there were additional funding available, would that be a consideration?
If there were additional funding made available, we would certainly take into consideration what we could do with that and what would be the best use of the funds we have available to us. But we would have to have additional funding made available to us for that.
And how soon would
speaking
that
to
happen?
that, you said it was the 2024 budget that this money was allocated from? The 800 and something?
Yes, the 1.14 million was allocated in the FY24 capital budget for.
I thought at last year's meeting, it was said that there was a grant that also was received by the county for this project. And
I don't
if
recall.
not, why, where was FEMA or COVID money, for infrastructure? There's nothing else that would come about other than just Baltimore County's normal annual budget?
It's going to directly impact Bryans Mill residents.
We don't currently have any grants from
There were
any
so
COVID
I must have misunderstood.
bills or from FEMA for this project. The county has used FEMA money to respond to natural disasters in the past, but
For
that's
the
not.
2018,
I believe we did use FEMA money for other projects.
The River Road.
The River Road Bridge was taken out during that. There were several other slope stabilizations that were done.
cool. All right, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's any traffic people here, but a lot of people use that as a cutoff road from Rolling Road going to Ellicott City. So if the detour could start at Old Frederick Road off of at Rolling Road so that the through traffic would be trained to just keep going out Rolling Road to the light at the Candlelight Inn to make their turn. Otherwise, if they come down to Oella and make the turn, it's gonna back up the traffic that needs to pull out from Oella onto Old Frederick.
That's a difficult intersection
Yeah.
as it is.
Yeah, so if they could train the traffic to go out Rolling Road to the light, especially like during construction and stuff, the through traffic that is, to keep the through traffic from getting back in the neighborhood there and backing up the traffic for people that actually have to use it.
Sure.
Are you following that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question is about encouraging the through traffic during the detour to not come all the way up to the
Oella.
road closure.
Yeah, to just go right out to the light, because you could time the light to handle more traffic, but the stop sign is a stop sign. And it'll-
So
actually saying
the exact
before
location of
Well
the
Avenue.
detour signs is going to be handled by our traffic planning
Okay, is
office.
there-
They'll take a
is
look
there
at
somebody
it.
that can
Traffic
handle-
engineers will take a look at it.
Okay.
That'll all get reviewed and approved. There will be signage far enough in advance for people to make decisions. And the other thing I can say is, once the detour's been in place for a little bit, the people who use that route frequently are already going to know an alternate route, and they won't need the signs anymore to remind them. They will find their best route. And if it's inconvenient for them to come down through that section, they won't keep going down there. People are smart enough to usually figure it out.
All right.
I have 3 questions. I represent a group of homeowners who live across from the proposed development. And during the first public meeting, I think it was a year or so ago, we submitted several emails and alternative proposals to the project team at the time. Are those going to be made available and included in the feedback that you're hoping to solicit this evening?
So the question is about feedback that was given at some of the previous meetings that we've held, and whether that's going to be brought forward. I don't know about made available,
Or will they be
what
shared
particular
with
things,
the
but
design team?
the receiving your feedback and taking it into account is an ongoing thing. We're keeping track of the feedback that we get, and we're keeping an eye on it and making sure we're not forgetting about what you said a year or two ago. We still have that in mind. We know that. We're keeping that with us as we proceed. But as the design progresses, we can ask you for more specific feedback on more particular items that we couldn't have asked about before.
I wanted to follow up on my neighbor's comment earlier on about the drainage on Old Frederick Road where the proposed barrier is going to be placed. Can the design team confirm that they're aware that the properties across from Old Frederick Road, where the barrier exists now, are located in a floodplain, and that your design takes into account that you're going to have to incorporate some kind of additional requirement to ensure that
You
our
increase the
homes
volume
are
that's
not
already there.
flooded as a result of the work that you do in the future.
So the question is, are we aware of the status of the homes across the road from the slope being in a floodplain? and what will we be doing about any changes to the drainage conditions. I believe, and Paul can confirm this, when we looked at the design, we saw that the area of slope that needed to be stabilized would lead us to, all of our impacts are not going to cause any negative impacts to the drainage at that north inlet.
That volume's twice what it was when Baltimore County did previous work, I forget which year it was, but they changed the route somewhat on Old Frederick Road. And that volume almost doubled when they did that because of that storm inlet. That storm inlet never existed before Baltimore County's work. You know, and they put that storm inlet in and dumped it into that stream.
I'm not familiar with that particular project, but as my bureau chief
They flattened the
said
road.
earlier,
There was several ups and downs in the road, and they flattened the road and put that storm inlet in. At that point.
I believe you. I just don't have any personal experience with that project, but we will bring your feedback back to the correct groups in the county and have them look and see, is it a maintenance issue? Is there a design issue? The right people to handle it will be informed about it.
I'm sorry, to clarify about the stormwater management and floodplain, you're saying that by doing this new slope and this work, there won't be any additional runoff caused by this. It will remain as it is or contained.
Okay, so the question is, will there be more runoff in the area? And a part of the drainage analysis, there's actually less impervious area, and that's pavement, essentially. So some of the water will trickle through the ground, so no additional.
But because you're not trying to remove rock bed in the slope, right? You're not trying to remove you said the rock's really dense and hard, you try not to mess with that. How much actual earth will be on that slope to absorb and, I guess, take?
Yeah, understood. Well, there's less impervious area.
Well, it is a more gentle slope, so any water coming down the slope will have a better chance of being absorbed by that slope rather than just sheeting off.
Okay.
Except that the rock is too impervious.
Well, in certain sections.
Yeah. I know it is behind my house.
Yeah, the south
In
end.
certain sections, and in those sections, we'll still have rock, but around that rock, it will be sloped up, that gentle slope, so that we can absorb that water. And some of the native plants that we will put in will help with that.
And in some areas, there's up to 20 feet of soil on top of that slope. And in other areas, it's just rock.
20 feet linear or?
Vertical, but depending on where the cross section is taken.
One of the recommendations that we made at the first public meeting a couple of years ago was to consider the camber of the road and to angle it at the slope side to a greater extent than the non-slope side to hopefully ensure that our homes would not be flooded.
The guy that
as a
would down
result of
Frederick
this
Road.
activity. And the storm drain, storm water management and mitigation should be considered as a joint effort by DPW traffic, your design team, so that we can actually kill two birds with one stone. Deal with the erosion, plus deal with the storm management issues that have plagued this particular section of the road, since my neighbor rightly mentioned that Baltimore County installed a non-functioning drainage inlet.
Yeah, that is a really good comment, and we will take care of that in the final design portion of this.
So these plans are designed, or they're reviewed by our transportation planning, stormwater management, the environmental protection, which is we're taking down the trees, our storm drain design, our floodplain designer, all these sections review our plans when we design them. So they will account and look into all the things that you're discussing.
Will there be a follow-up public meeting for us to review the final proposed
I'm sorry,
plan?
is there gonna
Will
be
there
a
be
follow-up?
another public meeting when all of those teams have had an opportunity to present their input, and a definitive project proposal is now available.
So that's be during the final design. The design will be complete at that point. It won't be a proposal at that.
So will the final design be presented to the public, to our community, for all
Yeah, we can do
feedback,
that.
or
We
at
can do
least
that.
for comment?
It won't be for comment at that point because it will be a final design. All the reviewing and permitting agencies will issue the permits then. So it will be present you where we are and how we're solving the problems that you presented to us.
Will the reports that various agencies have contributed to the overall final design be made available to the public for their review?
We don't issue internally official reports. They will present the design and provide comments back. So we can do a summary of comments, but there aren't actual reports.
Is there another point after today, or right now-ish, in the next month or so, where comments can be taken into account in the design?
So Beth's question, is there a point after today where comments can be taken into account? Like I said, we have our email, the phone number, any comments you leave today. For a certain amount of time, we can take those comments into account. At a certain point, we will reach a level of the design where we can no longer have changes in the design. But up until that point, we will be taking into account any of your feedback as it comes in.
The question is, when is that cutoff?
Yeah, will that kind be made available to us?
Sounds like the community is asking to make comments, and I just want to understand, so that they can understand when those comments are going to be
So there are still several months. The design will be entirely completed. We're looking at December 2025, but you have several months before we hit the point where any significant changes are not possible. I think I can work with the comms team, and we can probably send out maybe a flyer or a notice to the public that if you have any comments, you should get them in when we get closer to that point.
It's a great idea.
So a bike lane was one of the options. Can you all speak to the analysis and decision making regarding that?
So we looked at a couple different arrangements, and going down to one lane, there's just not enough room. And if we did have bike lanes, it would be one-way road anyway. There's not enough room for bike lanes and the traffic. And there was also issues when we looked into about tying in, like if you have bi-directional bike lanes, where are they going to go on the other side? They're going to be sharing at some point the lanes on the road. The tie down at the point of Frederick Road would have been okay. You still would have been crossing traffic, but past Bryans Mills, it was getting a little tricky. So, from a safety standpoint and from the one-lane road standpoint, that's where the decision was made. Sorry, I forgot to repeat the question. I was asking about the bike lanes, if you didn't get that.
Where was closing the road entirely considered as an option?
Closing the road entirely was considered when this project first got picked up by DPWT, but we reached out to the public for their input at that point, and there was not enough support for full closure of the roadway for us to pursue that option.
So it's Old Frederick Road. Are there any like historical significance to this, the design of the road? It's like, are we taking something away that we haven't considered culturally by going down to one lane?
So I would not expect that. A roadway, given that it's
not a scenic road. So
modern, it's paved with modern materials. The roadway itself probably does not have any cultural significance.
There's a 8.5 mile marker there.
Also, part of the permitting does include a review of the cultural resources. There are architectural historians who review projects and make sure that there's not anything in the area that could be of historic significance that needs to be taken into account during the design.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Councilman Pacquiao. I just wanted to also comment because astute question about the timeline for input. And as was mentioned, there was consideration about shutting the road down initially. But because of feedback from neighbors and community folks, that was taken off the table. And this meeting here is an opportunity to also influence this particular project and where they go, where the county goes from here and where we can go. There's still time to influence. To the question of that, I don't have the exact date on when the cutoff is, but we're going to work on that to continue to communicate with my office and everybody else to let you know when that is. But now is the time to voice your major concerns with anything that you've seen tonight and continue to reach out to the department and also my office with what you see. And I say that to say that this is consistently ongoing and your input for this still is and will be considered to the point where if this, they mentioned, and I know that this was referenced at the previous meeting too, $1.4 million was allocated in 2024. And that was also sort of a guesstimate on what it would take to do this project to completion. Through the analysis that's been done by Baltimore County staff, this is what can be done within the budget that was allocated. So if this is something for you all and your neighbors and consistently communicating with us, that is, they're gonna kick me, not acceptable, that will require more funding, which I will advocate for. But I also will say that does not mean that this will get done right away. And I just want to make sure that that's clear because the money was allocated in 2024. The 2025 budget has been passed without money for this project because we already had it allocated. So if this is something that after the input, the department feels there needs to be some sort of shift, as somebody was asking about 2 lanes, which would require 10 more feet milling into the hill, which would require more money, that is something that we'll advocate for if that is the will of the folks from the neighborhood that this is not acceptable and there's another direction that you all want to go. But that needs to be heard from you all tonight and moving forward about what's been presented tonight so we can, so that the department and we can take that into consideration. If nothing's said, and it's deemed that there's enough general support for this project, then it will move forward as is. And that timeline, that moment will hit where they cannot, there won't be any time for changes to that final design. So I just wanted to make sure, and I hope that's clear. And I'm happy to advocate, and consistently I want to hear from you as well, so I can help do that with the department as we move forward. And I'll hand back the mic to you.
Can I ask one question?
Thank you, Councilman.
About the traffic that's going to go around Oella to get back out to Frederick Road. That road isn't very steady either.
Right.
And then, I mean, you got great big trunks, tree trunks hanging down off the slopes that have been there for years and years, and who knows when they come down. But that would be an awful lot of traffic on Oella there.
So the question is about the traffic that would be diverted onto Oella Avenue as a result of the project. Paul, did you want to talk about the traffic analysis?
Yeah, sure. The detour route was looked at in the analysis based on the thresholds by the state, and the service was within the same threshold along the detour route as it is existing. In terms of the steep slopes on the side of Oella Avenue, that wasn't a part of the scope of this project, but just to speak on
What were
it.
the traffic counts again? I think that was one of your earlier slides.
The traffic count's 2,200. And when we look into the service, it's not just the counts.
I think that was earlier.
Yeah, that was the existing information.
There you go.
And you said that was done in normal course of a traffic study, at peak hours, weekday, I'm assuming during the school year.
Yes.
Yes. And you said it was up and down, or I don't know how you.
Yes.
But up and down the road, was it basically the same number of like?
Along the Bryans Mills Way to Frederick Road, along Old Frederick Road, yes, they were similar in traffic.
It's
Morning.
westbound in the morning and eastbound in the
Exactly.
afternoon.
Exactly, whatever traffic way is moving evening and morning, the difference there, the direction.
The basic point being made about OL is not for the detour. But once we've got Old Frederick as one way, that means that everybody who went down is now going to go around OL. So I mean, it's half your count.
So the detour and it's similar analysis along the detour and the permanent case in terms of that service. Now, hopefully, as Nick said, other people will use other routes because some people use it on Route 40 to get from Ellicott City to somewhere else. So,
Right.
they know it's going to be less, then hopefully there's less through traffic.
So after the road is one way at the bottom, people will have to use Owella to get to Frederick.
That's one
Or
route.
coming from Frederick. And
Yes, that's one route.
And you don't have, I would imagine, any kind of evaluation as to after this proposed change occurs on Old Frederick, what amount of traffic increase will be on Owella going from Frederick to Owella?
You can get moved back on it already.
Well, but people might just choose not to.
So it may not have been clear in the presentation, but it was not just the detour condition that was studied during the
Okay.
traffic
Yeah, that's
analysis.
what
The existing condition, the detour condition, and the final condition were all studied as a part of the traffic analysis.
Along that whole corridor and the intersections.
And what the findings were is that in all of those conditions, there will be some changes to the traffic patterns, but the level of service, how they measure how
Has
well
anybody thought
the
of putting a
roadway
red
is
light
working,
in well traffic?
the level of service does not change categories.
Okay, all right, so
We thought about a lot of possible cross sections for this portion of the roadway. Sidewalks, multi-use paths did come up when we were thinking about it, but ultimately, like Paul said earlier with the bike lane, there's not enough room to make it work all that great, and there are issues with connectivity at either end of the project limits. For example, there are no sidewalks on Frederick Road, so if you got to the end, you have nowhere to go.
But an actual curb on that side of the road, I can imagine that there's enough space to do just a curb.
There's an asphalt curb here now.
It's like a
But
little
it's only
tiny.
four-
Yeah, it's not an
it's
actual
4
curb.
inches high,
And I'm just wondering if
and
that,
it's
like a
useless.
curb would help alleviate some of what they're.
Yes, so the focus of this project is on the slope stability.
Right.
And we are making sure we are not going to worsen
What?
the
runoff.
the drainage issues in the area. We don't want a negative impact. We won't produce one, but that is as far as we are scoped to do.
Okay.
Last question I have. Our properties are aligned along and between a wetlands, a protected wetlands area across from the development. As a community, we would have 8 or 9 homes across from the barrier. We would really enjoy and be grateful for an environmental impact study that considered how this protected wetlands area might be impacted by both the construction vehicles, but also the post-construction period.
Yeah, anytime that there's a project like this, the part of that is going out in the field, locating natural resources like the wetlands that you mentioned, and part of the permitting process is telling them what we're planning on doing, and they tell us if there's any issues with that, and we work with them to change our design or include parts of the project to mitigate or depending on what we have to do. Sometimes we can't avoid impacting a wetland and we have to do something else elsewhere, similar to removing a tree and planting one nearby.
a lot of last year's conversation, I think there was a lot of talk about how little communication was done about having this forum. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone involved and how much you got the word out for this one, including a ginormous sign at the end of Bryans Mills. So it made me chuckle one day when I saw it, but I know it was because you heard all of our cries from last meeting. And just so thank you for doing what you could to make sure that the word got out, and hope that continues.
Thank you. Shout out to our comms team, two of whom are here, Beth and Ron, for helping us with all of those efforts.
Not being aware of the previous two meetings, I didn't know the input from my fellow area residents in Oella, but I guess I'll just say, given the comments I've heard, I'm probably a minority of one in asking to pursue perhaps additional funding with the possibility of keeping it at 2 lanes. I can live with one, but I'm, as I said, because I work with school bus operations, and that the route goes down there, as I said, it would make it inconvenient. It's not impossible. They'd have to come from Bryans Mill, back out onto Old Frederick, right on Oella, back down Frederick Road again, and 9 Mile. But anyway, that's what was my main consideration. Yes, it's convenient for me living on Old Frederick just to shoot down that way too. I can live with going over to Oella down, but I just, as I said, I guess I'm mostly a minority here of people not really overly concerned about keeping it two lanes. I can live with one, but I would love to have it be 2 lanes if we could find additional funding.
I was hoping you would say,
Right.
neighbor,
Yeah,
that it would be
that's-
closed, that you wanted the road closed,
Sorry.
because that's what I would prefer. So we're all neighbors and have completely different.
And feel free to send a written version of any of these requests to the email address Old Frederick Road at baltimorecountymd.gov. You can access the project webpage, and do make sure you gave us your email so that you can get a copy of this presentation.
And you're looking for opinions on like the walls as well, correct? Like a finish, if you want to.
You're probably not the only one.
Tell us about the plants you want. Tell us about the stone plants you want. If you have other opinions or questions or concerns, send them to us and we can.
So send us your thoughts on the project in any capacity, but in particular, the aesthetics are wide open right now. We want to hear from the people who live there so that we can bring that to the table when we go to design it.
Is there a cost difference between the stamped wall and the plain concrete wall? I know I'm in concrete, stamped walls cost a lot more.
There is a cost increase for the stamped wall, but sometimes that's what the project needs to get the public opinion on the side.
It's way better.
We have accounted for, so the construction price that we gave includes the more expensive option. We haven't presented you something that we don't have the funding to do.
So it looked like the wall was fairly short, like 3 or 4 feet tall. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the Maryland 42-inch barrier, so between 3 to 4 feet.
Do those types of walls have, like, is there a lot of maintenance needed for those, or are those fairly straightforward?
They're pretty low maintenance. Honestly, probably the most repair that gets done to them is when cars hit them. So I recommend not doing that.
It's not a major structure, doesn't require any routine inspection.
It's fairly easy to repair when it does get damaged.
Just following up on that question, it just occurred to me, what happens to runoff coming down the slope when it hits the back of the barrier wall?
So part of the barrier's design in the MDOT standard accounts for normal runoff coming from behind on the
Is there
slope.
weep holes in the wall?
Yeah, there are weep holes above.
With every 16 feet or so, it's a drainage block.
Yeah.
And
So
a little bench.
well draining material is put behind the wall to make sure there's no hydrostatic pressure that's going to impact the wall. Weep holes to let all that out, and all of that is taken into account in the drainage design. All right, no more questions. I think we can wrap up here. Thank you all for coming.